Hi, Tish here. School's out, but learning never ends.
Come check this.
It's quiz time. Let's see how much you know about what led up to the Revolutionary War. Remember to watch to the end and see what my little Chachi Marie is doing back home. Let's start with the first question. Much of the dissension that happened in the Revolutionary War started in Boston. There was one main guy who was really making a ruckus about what was going on as far as taxes in Boston. Who was that? His name was Samuel Adams, and he argued that the colonists should not have taxation without what? They would yell, "No taxation without representation," basically because they wanted a voice in their government. They understood that they needed to pay taxes, but they wanted a voice. The king and parliament back in England had a problem though. There was a war that cost them a lot of money in the colonies. What was that war called? Good. That war was called the French Indian War, basically because the French and the Indians got together and they fought against England. So, once the king and Parliament saw that they spent so much money on the French Indian War, what was the first tax that they imposed on the people? Right, the sugar tax. What was the tax called that they had to have an emblem on every piece of paper in the home? That was called the Stamp Act. Can you imagine having to put a stamp on every legal document, playing card, letter that is in your home during the colonial period, and to pay tax on that? That infuriated the people. So a gang was started. What was that gang called? It was called the Sons of Liberty. It was led by Samuel Adams, and all the guys were involved. They actually wrote letters to all the colonies called the Committee of Correspondence, let them know what was happening with all of these taxes. Patrick Henry wrote some resolutions about what he thought the king and parliament should do for the colonists. Well, the king and parliament came back with a certain act that said, you know what, we can do whatever we want. What was that act called? It was called the Declaratory Act. But the king and parliament were not done there. They did another act where they would tax duties on anything coming into the colonies. Lead, paint, tea, paper. What was that act called? That was called the Townshend Acts. And it led a certain group of people to boycott all these products that they put duties on. Who boycotted all those products? That was the Daughters of Liberty. So all these things were happening with taxes, and people were getting very angry, especially in Boston. One day, there was a skirmish on the streets of Boston where some of the people were yelling at the redcoats that were there and throwing snowballs and rocks and such. One of the redcoats hit one of the colonists who all were unarmed. And another colonist said, "Oh yeah, fire if you dare." And they did. What was that skirmish called? It was called the Boston Massacre. How many people died in the Boston Massacre? 5 people died, including Chrismas Addict, who is the only name that we remember. He was half black, half Native American, and he was the first one to die in the massacre. So this all led to craziness in the colonies. What is the guy's name who made an etching about the Boston Massacre? And he actually named it the Bloody Massacre. I'll give you a hint. I have a crush on him. His name is Paul Revere. England found out how angry everybody was in Boston. So England decided to stop all the taxes except for one. What was that one? You're right, the tea tax. People were so mad because the Tea Act said that they couldn't buy the tea that they wanted. They had to buy the tea from the East India Company, and they didn't like that tea. They thought that that was wrong, that they had to do that. It led to what big event in Boston Harbor? That's right, it led to the Boston Tea Party, where they dressed up as Native Americans and dumped a lot of tea worth a lot of money overboard. How much was that tea worth in today's dollars? It was 340 chests of tea worth over $1 million. King and Parliament were furious about that. So they had a new set of laws. What were those laws called? They were called the Intolerable Acts because these little colonists were intolerable. And what one act was part of the Intolerable Acts that made the people of Boston house soldiers in their homes? That was called the Quartering Act. So you can imagine that we needed representatives from every colony to go to the First Continental Congress. Everybody came except for one colony. What colony didn't show up? They never got the email. It was Georgia. Who said this famous quote? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Who said that? The person who said that was Patrick Henry. Okay, for your last question. The Second Continental Congress, the delegates had to decide whether to declare war on Great Britain, the superpower of the world. There's a lot of contention whether to do this or not, so they decided to draft a document that asked the king to give us representation in Parliament so that we could help govern ourselves. What was that petition called? That petition was called the Olive Branch Petition. And you know what? The king didn't even read it, which really annoyed the delegates. Now, I know you've been waiting for Chachi Marie, so I'm going to go home right now and see what she's up to.